Amara's small hands trembled as she clutched her boarding pass, tears streaming down her cheeks. Beside her, Naomi's voice shook as she spoke into the phone.
"Daddy, they won't let us on."
Just inches away, flight attendant Sandra Mills stood firm, one hand raised like a barrier, blocking the jet bridge. Around them, passengers stared, some whispering, others recording. They thought these were just two little girls denied a seat. What they didn't know was that this moment would trigger a storm, one phone call away from shutting down an entire airline. Naomi's voice trembled as she gripped the phone tightly, her small fingers pressing the device so close to her ear it was almost shaking.
"Daddy, they won't let us on."
Her voice cracked on the last word. Beside her, Amara clutched her boarding pass with both hands, the glossy paper now wrinkled from her tight grip. Her eyes were red, tears slipping down her round cheeks. A step away, flight attendant Sandra Mills stood planted like a wall, her polished shoes inches from the yellow safety line on the jet bridge. Her hand was outstretched, palm stiff, blocking them from moving forward. The terminal was no longer quiet. Passengers nearby slowed their steps, their eyes darting toward the scene. Some exchanged uneasy looks, while others instinctively reached for their phones, recording the moment. Murmurs spread like ripples on water. No one seemed to know exactly what was happening, but everyone could sense the tension in the air. "Please step aside, girls," Sandra said, her tone tight but calculated, her eyes shifting toward the rows of first-class passengers already boarding. "This flight is full and your boarding passes—" She didn't finish the sentence, just shook her head slightly as if the rest was too complicated to explain to two children. Naomi opened her mouth to protest, but the crackling of the phone in her hand reminded her she wasn't alone.
"Daddy's coming,"
she whispered to Amara, though her voice carried a doubt she didn't want her sister to hear. For a moment, Amara's crying softened, her wide brown eyes locking onto Naomi's.
"Will we miss it?"
she whispered back, her voice barely audible over the hum of the jet bridge. But before the moment could spiral further, we shift back, just a few hours earlier. It had been an exciting morning. At just 8 years old, Amara and Naomi Carter were dressed in their matching navy blue coats, their hair neatly braided the night before. Each wore a lanyard around their neck with a plastic tag that read, "Unaccompanied Minor," a requirement for children flying alone. Their father, David Carter, had hugged them both goodbye at the car drop-off. "Straight to Boston," he'd said, kneeling down so his eyes were level with theirs. "No distractions. And remember, only call me if it's something you really, truly can't handle yourselves. Okay?" "Okay, Daddy," they chimed together, their voices carrying both excitement and the careful determination of children who wanted to make their father proud. Naomi clutched the envelope containing their boarding passes, a pair of crisp first-class tickets for Flight 482 on Aurora Airlines. David had insisted on the upgraded seats, not as a show of wealth, but for safety. Better supervision, quicker service, and a smoother experience for their first trip without him. The Denver International Airport was buzzing that morning, a steady hum of announcements and rolling suitcases. Amara and Naomi held hands as they approached the first-class check-in counter, their matching backpacks bouncing with every step. The man behind the counter barely looked at them. His name tag read Ethan Brooks, his crisp uniform immaculate. Without glancing up, he called, "Next!" Naomi stepped forward confidently, placing the tickets on the counter. "Good morning, we're flying to Boston." But Ethan's eyes shifted, not to them, but to the tall man in a gray suit behind them. "Next, sir. Come on up," Ethan said smoothly, ignoring the two girls as though they weren't there. Naomi blinked, confused.
We were next,"
she said carefully, her voice polite but steady. Ethan finally looked at them, his expression flat. His eyes flicked down to the tickets. "First class?" he asked, his tone carrying the faintest trace of disbelief. "Who booked these?"
"Our dad,"
Naomi said, her words clipped in a way that mimicked the seriousness she'd heard in her father's voice during important moments. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting," he murmured. picking up the tickets and scanning them. A small red symbol blinked on his screen. His eyebrows rose ever so slightly, as if he'd just discovered something that confirmed an unspoken suspicion. "These tickets," he tapped the screen twice. "They're marked. I'll have to check something in the system. Step aside, please." Naomi frowned. "Marked? What does that mean?" "It means," Ethan said in a voice that was suddenly louder, as if meant for the nearby passengers to hear, "there might be an error in your booking."
"Just a routine check."
Amara's eyes welled with uncertainty, glancing at Naomi. The younger twin's lip trembled as she whispered,
"Did we do something wrong?"
Naomi shook her head firmly. "No, Daddy booked these himself. It's just a mistake." Behind them, the tall man in the gray suit stepped forward, placing his briefcase on the counter. Ethan's demeanor shifted instantly, his smile brightening as he processed the man's check-in without a hitch. Naomi's stomach knotted as she stepped aside with Amara. She noticed the way Ethan was careful to lower his voice when he spoke into the phone at his desk. She couldn't hear his words, but his eyes flicked toward them twice before he hung up. Minutes ticked by. Amara hugged her boarding pass tightly, her excitement from the morning fading into worry. "Naomi, do you think we'll still go to Boston?" Naomi forced a smile, though she didn't feel it. "Of course we will. Daddy said everything would be fine." But deep down, something about the way Ethan had looked at their tickets made her uneasy. Finally, Ethan returned their boarding passes. His expression was neutral, his voice smooth. "You're all set. Gate 32, boarding in an hour." Naomi exhaled in relief, but as they walked away, Amara whispered,
"Why did it feel like he didn't want us to go?"
Naomi didn't have an answer. Back in the present, Naomi's voice was firmer now as she spoke into the phone.
"Daddy, please hurry. We're at the gate and—"
Sandra Mill's voice cut through, polite but immovable.
"Girls, I'm sorry, but your boarding passes aren't valid for this flight. I need you to step aside."
Naomi's heart pounded. The gate agent had said everything was fine. Why was this happening again? Passengers' eyes were on them, phones still raised. Amara's grip on her sister's coat tightened. Naomi swallowed hard, her voice trembling but clear.
"We have our seats, and we're not moving until Daddy says so."
The air between them seemed to thicken, the quiet hum of the jet bridge replaced by the low buzz of an audience holding its breath. This wasn't just about two little girls anymore. Something bigger was unfolding, and no one watching could have guessed just how big it would become. Naomi guided Amara away from the gate, her hand steady on her sister's shoulder as they found a quiet bench in the waiting area. Amara sniffled, clutching her wrinkled boarding pass like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. Naomi tried to smile, but her mind was spinning. 8 years old was still small enough to be shielded from the world's harder edges, but Naomi had always felt older than her years. David Carter, their father, often teased her that she had the boardroom eyes of someone twice her age, observant, cautious, always reading the room before making a move. From the outside, the twins looked like any other unaccompanied minors traveling for the first time. Their navy blue coats matched perfectly, their braids were neatly tied back, and their lanyards marked them clearly as passengers needing extra care. But there was a story behind those careful details, one they had both been told never to share with strangers. David Carter had taken over as CEO of Aurora Airlines just 6 weeks ago, a move that had made waves in the industry. He was brought in as a turnaround specialist, a man known for repairing companies in trouble. What almost no one knew was how deliberately he had chosen to keep his family invisible during this time. Aurora Airlines was under scrutiny. Years of customer complaints, whispers of systemic bias, and a reputation for inconsistency had left the brand vulnerable. David's plan was precise. He wanted to see the airline through the eyes of ordinary passengers before making changes, and that meant his daughters couldn't be known as the CEO's kids. So, their tickets to Boston were booked through a private account. No executive privileges, no names flagged in the system, Just two little girls with first-class seats, like any other paying customers. At least, that had been the plan. Amara's voice broke Naomi's thoughts.
Why did she say our tickets aren't valid? Daddy booked them himself.
Naomi squeezed her sister's hand.
I don't know yet, but we're going to Boston, just like we planned.
She didn't want to scare Amara, but something about the way Ethan Brooks had handled their check-in stayed with her. The way his eyes had shifted when he saw their tickets. The way his voice lowered when he stepped aside to make a call. A few gates away, Ethan Brooks had retreated behind the counter at another service desk. His voice was low, his hand covering the mouthpiece of the phone as he spoke. Yeah, it's the Carter girls. I don't know how they ended up in the system like this, but the tickets flagged red the second I scanned them. No, I didn't tell them anything. Just move them along to 32. He glanced over his shoulder, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. Yes, I'll keep an eye on them, but you'd better make sure it's handled before boarding. He hung up, his expression tight, before turning back to assist another passenger. Back at the bench, Naomi was doing her best to distract Amara. She pulled out the crossword puzzle book they'd brought, the one David had slipped into their backpack that morning.
Remember, Daddy said this one was tricky. Let's see if we can beat it before boarding.
Amara's tears had dried into faint salt tracks on her cheeks. She picked up her pencil and leaned closer.
What's a 6-letter word for storm?
Tempest, Naomi answered automatically. But her eyes weren't on the page. They were scanning the terminal, her mind racing with possibilities. David had warned them that sometimes people might treat them differently, even without knowing who they were. People make judgments quickly, he had said once over breakfast. Sometimes it's because of how you look. Sometimes it's because of what they assume about you. But what matters most is how you respond to it. Naomi had thought he was talking about school. Now she wasn't so sure. As boarding time grew closer, an announcement echoed overhead. Passengers traveling on Aurora Flight 482 to Boston, please proceed to Gate 32 for pre-boarding. Naomi tucked the puzzle book back into her backpack.
Come on, we should line up early.
Amara nodded, her earlier excitement returning in small flickers.
Do you think the seats will have the little TVs?
They should, Naomi said with a smile, though she was already bracing herself for another potential problem. When they approached Gate 32, the scene looked calm. Passengers milled about, some standing in line, others sipping coffee. Richard Cole, the gate agent, was checking boarding passes with a professional smile. Naomi stepped forward, holding out both passes. Richard's smile faltered ever so slightly as he scanned them. The red light blinked, just as it had with Ethan. That's odd, Richard murmured, tapping his screen. Naomi felt her stomach drop.
Is there a problem?
Richard hesitated.
Your tickets. They're showing as flagged. I'll need to verify something with the supervisor. Could you step aside for just a moment?
Naomi tightened her hold on Amara's hand. This was too familiar. From the corner of her eye, she saw Diane Harris approaching. The supervisor's expression was calm, her posture controlled. Naomi felt a flicker of hope. Another woman of color. Someone who might understand. Diane leaned in, speaking quietly.
Girls, I'm sure this is just a mix-up. Why don't you wait over here with me while we get it sorted?
Naomi nodded slowly, though she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. She caught a glimpse of Richard typing something into his computer before reaching for the phone at his desk. Behind the desk, just barely visible, the small red flag icon blinked again on the screen. Across the terminal, Ethan Brooks watched from a distance, his phone in hand. Another call, another low-voiced update.
They're at the gate. Harris is with them now.
Yeah, I know what the protocol says. Just make sure it doesn't reach boarding. He ended the call, slipping his phone into his pocket, his eyes following the two little girls who, for now, still believed they'd be on that flight. Naomi tightened her grip on Amara's hand as they approached the TSA security checkpoint. The line wasn't especially long, but it moved slowly, each beep of the scanner echoing through the crowded terminal. The smell of coffee, perfume, and the faint tang of disinfectant mingled in the air. Naomi glanced at the clock overhead. They still had time before boarding, but each delay made her stomach twist a little tighter. She tried to keep her expression calm for Amara's sake, even though her mind was still on the strange red flag at check-in and the way Ethan Brooks had made that phone call. "Next!" a firm voice barked. The twins stepped forward. The TSA officer on duty was a tall woman with sharp eyes, her name tag reading Vanessa Clark. Her gaze swept over them in a way that made Naomi feel smaller, like they were being measured against some invisible standard. Vanessa's lips curled into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Random check," she announced loudly, her voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to glance over. "Step to the side, please." Naomi's chest tightened. "Random?" she repeated, her tone even. "Yes, random." Vanessa gestured to a separate inspection table. "We'll need to examine your bags thoroughly." Amara's brow furrowed, her small voice breaking through. "But we're just going to Boston." Vanessa's smile didn't change. "And you will, once we make sure everything's safe. Rules are rules." Naomi led her sister to the table, setting their backpacks down. She had read the airport's unaccompanied minor guidelines enough to know that random checks weren't unusual, but something about Vanessa's tone made her uneasy. Vanessa unzipped Naomi's bag first, rummaging through it with deliberate slowness. She pulled out the puzzle book, flipping through it as if expecting something to fall out. She took out the snack pack David had packed, unsealing the top and tilting it so grapes rolled across the table. Amara's eyes widened as Vanessa reached for her backpack. She hesitated a moment before unzipping it, revealing the stuffed bear she always traveled with. "Be careful, please," Amara whispered. "That's Mr. Buttons." Vanessa gave her a look that suggested she hadn't heard, or didn't care. She tugged at a seam along the bear's side, the sound of tearing fabric sharp in the air. White stuffing spilled out onto the table. Amara's breath hitched. "You ripped him!" "It's standard," Vanessa said coolly, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "We have to make sure nothing's concealed inside." She turned the bear upside down, shaking it so that the last bit of stuffing drifted onto the pile. Naomi reached out instinctively, catching Mr. Buttons before he hit the table. Her jaw tightened. "We told you, it's just a toy." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her tone just a shade colder. "And now we know for sure." Naomi's stomach churned as Vanessa moved on to the rest of the bag. She pulled out a plastic container with Amara's allergy-safe snacks, popped the lid open, and tipped it slightly so crackers tumbled out onto the table. Behind them, a younger TSA agent had paused mid-task. His name badge read Evan Price, and he looked like he might still be in his first year on the job. His eyes flicked between Vanessa's hands and the twins, a faint crease forming on his forehead. Naomi noticed him watching. For a brief moment, she thought he might step in, but he said nothing, only adjusting the belt at his waist and turning slightly away. His expression, though, lingered, concern mixed with something more cautious. Vanessa continued her inspection until the backpacks were a disorganized mess, the bear limp and torn, the snacks scattered. "All right," she said finally, as if granting some kind of favor. "You can repack your things." Naomi began gathering the crackers, her fingers trembling slightly as she helped Amara scoop the stuffing back into Mr. Buttons. Amara's eyes were shiny, her lower lip trembling, but she didn't cry. Not here, not in front of Vanessa. When everything was repacked as best as they could manage, Vanessa waved them toward the scanner. "Have a nice flight, girls," she said in a tone so falsely pleasant that Naomi almost turned back to glare. Instead, she led Amara away, the bear tucked under her sister's arm like a wounded friend. Once they were past the checkpoint, Naomi guided them toward a quieter corner of the terminal. She pulled out her phone, hesitating. "Are you calling Daddy?" Amara asked softly, her voice hopeful but nervous. Naomi glanced at her sister. "I think I should. This isn't normal. First check-in, now this." Amara shook her head quickly. "No, he said to only call if it's really, really bad. He's in a big meeting today, remember? We can fix this." Naomi hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Amara's plea wasn't just about rules. She hated the idea of worrying their father. David Carter's position was demanding, and Amara wanted to show him they could handle things on their own. Naomi slipped the phone back into her bag, though unease gnawed at her. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll figure it out." Amara gave a small smile, hugging Mr. Buttons tighter. "We always do." Naomi didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back toward the security checkpoint, where Vanessa was speaking to another agent. Her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. A few feet away, Evan Price caught Naomi's gaze briefly before looking away again, his jaw tightening. Naomi didn't know why, but she felt certain this wasn't the last time she'd see that look. The hum of the terminal felt different after the TSA checkpoint. Naomi walked a little closer to Amara, her eyes constantly scanning the crowds. The clock above gate 32 told her they still had some time before boarding, but both girls' stomachs were rumbling. Amara clutched Mr. Buttons like a lifeline, her other hand wrapped tightly around her boarding pass. Naomi tried to keep her tone light. "Let's get something to eat, then we can head to the gate early." The Sky Grill restaurant loomed just a few steps away, its glass front giving a clear view of half-filled tables inside. A sign outside read, "Quick service, fresh meals, walk-ins welcome." Naomi's shoulders loosened slightly. "Perfect," she murmured. Inside, the air smelled of grilled chicken and fresh bread. Amara's eyes brightened. "Can we split pancakes?" Naomi smiled. "Let's ask." They approached the hostess stand, where a blonde woman in a pressed uniform looked up from her phone. Her name tag read Melissa Crane. Her smile was instant, until her eyes landed on them. Melissa's tone cooled a degree. "How many?" "2, please," Naomi said, holding her voice steady. Melissa tapped at her tablet, glancing briefly over their heads toward a white family lingering nearby. "There's going to be a 45-minute wait for a table," she said smoothly, without looking directly at the girls. Naomi blinked. "But there are empty tables." She gestured toward at least 4 open spots in clear view. Melissa's lips pressed into a polite smile. "Those are reserved." Amara tilted her head. "Your sign says you don't take reservations." Melissa's cheeks colored faintly, but her voice stayed even. "That's an outdated sign. We take them now." As if on cue, a white couple entered behind the girls. Melissa's smile returned instantly, warm and bright. "2, right this way." She grabbed menus and led them to one of the reserved tables without hesitation. Naomi's jaw tightened. "That's not fair," she said under her breath. Melissa returned, her expression now harder. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Naomi said calmly. "We've been waiting, and you just gave a table to people who came in after us." Melissa's tone sharpened. "If you continue to cause a disruption, I'll have to ask you to leave. Airport regulations allow us to refuse service to anyone causing a scene." Before Naomi could respond, a tall man in a tie approached. His name tag read, Keith Foster, manager. His gaze fixed on them instantly. "What's going on here?" Melissa's voice was smooth. "These girls are upset about the wait time. I explained we're full." Keith's eyes didn't even flick toward the empty tables. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voices. We have other customers trying to enjoy their meals." Amara's voice was small but steady. "We're not being loud. We just want food." Keith's jaw tightened. "If you can't behave, I'll call airport security." Naomi felt Amara tense beside her. She forced a deep breath, knowing her sister was on the verge of tears. "That won't be necessary," Naomi said evenly. "We'll find somewhere else to eat." Keith gave a tight nod as if dismissing them. "That's for the best." As they turned to leave, Amara clutched her bear closer. "Why won't anyone just let us eat?" Naomi didn't have an answer. They had just stepped outside when a voice called softly from behind. "Wait!" They turned to see a Latina waitress hurrying toward them, glancing over her shoulder as if making sure Keith wasn't watching. Her name tag read, Elena Morales. She slowed as she reached them, slipping 2 paper vouchers into Naomi's hand. "Here, it's for the food court." It's not much, but you can get something to eat without trouble. Naomi blinked in surprise.
Thank you.
Elena hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper.
And keep your tickets and boarding passes close.
Don't let anyone else handle them unless you absolutely have to. Amara's brow furrowed.
Why?
Elena's eyes flicked toward the restaurant, then back. Because I've seen things. People losing tickets, reassigning seats. It doesn't happen by accident. Naomi's pulse quickened.
Someone's trying to take our seats?
Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. I can't say for sure, but I've worked here long enough to know when something isn't normal, and nothing about what just happened to you is normal. She straightened, her voice now slightly louder, as if switching back to casual conversation.
Enjoy the rest of your trip, she said brightly. The food court's just down that way.
Then she turned and walked briskly back toward the restaurant, her shoulders tight. Naomi stared at the vouchers in her hand. Amara's voice was a whisper.
Naomi, what did she mean?
Naomi tucked the vouchers carefully into her bag. I'm not sure, but I think we should be extra careful from now on. Amara hugged Mr. Buttons tighter, her eyes darting nervously toward the gates. They made their way to the food court, where the scent of warm pretzels and fried chicken was almost enough to make Amara smile again. They used the vouchers for 2 small meals, sitting at a table tucked away in the corner. Amara took a bite of her sandwich, then glanced at her sister.
Do you think Daddy would be mad if we called him?
Naomi shook her head slightly.
Not mad, but he trusted us to handle this on our own unless it was an emergency. We can do this.
Amara chewed in silence, her eyes still worried. Naomi looked down at their boarding passes, now tucked securely in the inner pocket of her bag. She thought about Elena's warning. Don't let anyone else handle them unless you absolutely have to. For the first time, Naomi wondered if the strange treatment they'd been getting wasn't just bad luck or rudeness. Maybe it was something more deliberate. When they finished their meal, Naomi checked the time. Boarding would start soon.
Let's go,
she said, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. As they walked toward Gate 32, Amara reached for her hand. Do you think it will be okay now? Naomi squeezed her hand.
I hope so.
But her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the terminal, alert for any sign of trouble. The gate area for Flight 482 was buzzing with the low hum of travelers preparing to board. Naomi guided Amara toward Gate 32, clutching both their boarding passes in one hand while her other hand gripped her sister's. Amara was holding Mr. Buttons again, the poor bear still missing a seam from the TSA inspection. Her wide eyes scanned the gate as if searching for signs of trouble. Naomi tried to keep her voice calm. We just need to get through this, then we'll be on the plane. Okay? Amara nodded, though she didn't look convinced. At the gate desk, Richard Cole stood behind the counter, his smile bright for the passengers in line ahead of them. As each first-class passenger stepped forward, he scanned their passes and waved them through without pause. When Naomi stepped up, offering their boarding passes, Richard's smile faltered. He scanned the tickets, and the familiar red symbol flashed on the screen. Huh, he murmured, his fingers tapping at the keyboard. Naomi's heart sank. Is there a problem? Richard looked at her, then down at the passes again. Your tickets, they're showing as invalid. I'm going to need to verify something. Amara's grip on Naomi's coat tightened.
Invalid?
She whispered. Naomi kept her voice level. These were booked by our father. We've already been checked in. Richard's polite expression didn't change, but his voice dropped a notch. I'm going to ask you to step aside for a moment. He gestured to a small space off to the side of the counter. Naomi could feel eyes on them from the nearby passengers. Her cheeks burned, but she stepped aside with Amara, trying to shield her sister from the stares. Moments later, a woman in a neat blazer approached. Her name tag read Diane Harris, Supervisor. Naomi felt a flicker of relief. Diane was a black woman, and for a moment Naomi thought maybe, just maybe, someone would finally help them. Diane's voice was calm, almost warm. Hello, girls. I understand there's been some confusion about your tickets.
Yes, ma'am,
Naomi said quickly. They're valid. We've had them since check-in. Diane glanced at Richard, who shrugged faintly as if to say,
"What can you do?"
Then she looked back at Naomi and Amara.
"Why don't you come over here and talk with me for a moment?"
Naomi followed, guiding Amara a few steps away from the crowd. Diane's tone lowered, still measured. "I want you to understand something. Sometimes, things happen in travel. Systems flag tickets. Mistakes get made. The best thing you can do is stay calm, cooperate, and let the staff handle it." Naomi frowned. "We have been calm, but our tickets keep getting flagged, and it's always us. It doesn't happen to anyone else." Diane's smile stayed in place, but there was a sharpness in her eyes now. "Girls like us," she said carefully, "don't get far by making scenes. We get where we're going by being twice as polite, twice as patient, twice as quiet."
"That's just reality?"
Naomi felt something twist in her chest.
"We haven't made a scene,"
she said, her voice steady but firm.
"We just want to get on our plane."
Diane tilted her head.
"I'm not saying you've done anything wrong. I'm saying this is how the world works. Sometimes it's better to avoid trouble than to challenge it."
Amara's voice broke in, small and uncertain.
"But we didn't do anything wrong. Why are they treating us like this?"
Diane's smile flickered just a fraction. "I know it doesn't feel fair, but trust me, keeping your heads down is the quickest way to get through it." Naomi felt the flicker of hope she'd had when Diane appeared vanish completely. This wasn't help. This was just another way of telling them to accept what was happening. Richard's voice called from the desk.
"Supervisor Harris? The system cleared their passes after all."
Diane turned back to the girls, her smile perfectly restored.
"See? All sorted. You can go ahead now."
Naomi nodded stiffly, taking back the boarding passes. "Thank you." But as they stepped toward the gate again, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a string of unrelated mistakes. Every step of the way, check-in, security, the restaurant, now boarding. Someone was trying to make sure they didn't get on that plane. And Diane's calm insistence that they should just stay quiet, that only made Naomi more certain. Amara tugged at her hand.
"Do you think it's over now?"
Naomi looked down at her sister.
"I think we just need to be careful."
Amara's brow furrowed. "Careful how?" Naomi glanced toward the jet bridge where passengers were beginning to line up.
"By watching everyone,
and by holding onto these passes like our lives depend on it." As they joined the boarding line, Naomi felt her phone buzz in her pocket. For a split second, she thought about calling their father, but Amara's words from earlier echoed in her mind.
"He's in a big meeting today. We can fix this."
So Naomi slipped the phone back into her pocket, her jaw tightening. She would give this one more chance, but her patience was running out. The boarding line inched forward, each beep of the scanner a small victory for the passengers ahead. Naomi kept her grip tight on Amara's hand, her other hand holding their boarding passes like a shield. They reached the front, Richard scanning their passes once more with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. This time, the green light blinked. "Go ahead," he said, his voice smooth. Naomi felt a flicker of relief. At last. Amara's small smile returned as they stepped onto the jet bridge, the sound of the plane's engines humming faintly beyond the door. The narrow walkway echoed with the shuffle of footsteps and the occasional creak of the metal floor beneath them. They were halfway down the bridge when it happened. A tall woman in a navy blue uniform stepped forward from the aircraft door. Her posture was crisp, her smile professional, but her outstretched hand blocked their path. Her name tag read Sandra Mills, flight attendant. "Hold on," Sandra said, her tone firm. "You two need to step aside for a moment." Naomi's relief evaporated instantly.
"Why? Our tickets just cleared."
Sandra's smile didn't falter, but her tone turned measured.
"I've received a notice to verify your boarding. Standard procedure."
Amara's eyes widened.
"Again?"
Her voice cracked slightly. Sandra crouched slightly so her face was closer to theirs.
Just wait here, all right? I need to check something.
Behind them, passengers began to queue, glancing curiously at the scene. Some murmured to each other, others leaned slightly to see what the holdup was. Naomi stepped sideways, pulling Amara with her to avoid blocking the walkway. Her voice was steady but firm.
We've already been checked 3 times. What else do you need to verify?
Sandra's eyes narrowed just a fraction, though her smile stayed in place.
It's above my clearance. I just follow instructions.
A voice from behind broke the tension.
Excuse me, is there a problem here?
Naomi turned to see a man in his 40s wearing a tailored suit, his first-class boarding pass in hand. His brow was furrowed, his phone already raised halfway, as if ready to record. Sandra straightened.
No problem, sir. Just a quick verification for these young passengers.
The man's eyebrows lifted. They've got first-class boarding passes. What exactly needs verifying? Sandra's smile thinned.
Sir, I need to ask you to step aboard.
But instead of complying, the man pressed the record button on his phone. Interesting. I'll just make sure we have a record of this. Naomi's pulse quickened. She wasn't sure who he was, but for the first time all day, someone outside of herself seemed to notice the pattern. Sandra's posture stiffened.
Sir, recording on the jet bridge isn't allowed.
The man didn't lower his phone. I think the public would be very interested in seeing why 2 unaccompanied minors with valid tickets are being stopped before boarding. Naomi caught the faintest flicker of discomfort in Sandra's eyes. Passengers behind them began murmuring, a ripple of curiosity moving down the line. 1 or 2 others pulled out their phones, following the man's lead. Sandra's professional mask stayed in place, but her voice was taut now.
Girls, just wait here.
She stepped back toward the aircraft door, murmuring something into her intercom. Naomi turned to Amara, who was clutching Mr. Buttons like a shield.
It's okay,
Naomi whispered. But inside, she felt the same cold certainty she'd felt at the gate. This wasn't a random delay. Amara's voice was small.
Naomi, I think someone really doesn't want us on this plane.
Naomi swallowed hard.
I think you're right.
Sandra reappeared a moment later, her expression unchanged.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to wait off to the side until I receive clearance.
Naomi's patience snapped. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled to her father's contact.
I'm calling Daddy.
Amara's eyes widened.
But his meeting...
Naomi's jaw tightened.
This is the emergency he meant.
She pressed the call button, holding the phone to her ear. The ringing felt like it went on forever before a deep, steady voice answered.
Naomi, what's wrong?
Naomi's voice shook, though she kept it low.
They won't let us board.
Again, there was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that carried weight.
Where are you?
Gate 32, the jet bridge. Sandra Mills stopped us. David Carter's voice lowered, calm but with an unmistakable steel.
Stay where you are. Don't argue, and don't move until I tell you.
Naomi felt her shoulders drop slightly. Okay. The man in the suit had lowered his phone slightly, but his expression was still sharp as he looked between the twins and Sandra.
You all right, girls?
Naomi nodded. Our dad's on the phone. The man gave a faint smile. Good. Keep him there. Sandra's radio crackled softly, her eyes flicking toward the open aircraft door. A faint line appeared between her brows, but she said nothing, stepping just far enough aside to let other passengers pass while keeping the twins in place. The man in the suit tapped something on his phone, sending the video upload through. Within minutes, the sound of notifications began pinging faintly from phones in the boarding area behind them. Someone whispered,
Hey, isn't that happening right now at Gate 32?
Naomi glanced at Amara.
Do you hear that?
Amara nodded.
People are watching us?
Naomi squeezed her sister's hand.
Good, let them watch.
Sandra's voice came over the intercom again, her tone still carefully neutral.
Gate 32, please confirm status on passengers Carter, unaccompanied minors.
A voice on the other end murmured back something Naomi couldn't make out. Sandra turned toward them. Her smile was back in place, but Naomi noticed the way her jaw was tighter now.
We'll have you on board shortly,
she said. Naomi didn't respond. She still had her phone to her ear.
Daddy, did you hear that?
David Carter's voice was quiet, measured. I heard it. Stay exactly where you are. I'll be calling the station manager in Denver in 2 minutes. Naomi felt the knot in her stomach loosen slightly.
Okay.
Behind them, murmurs grew louder. The man in the suit's video had already begun to spread online, picked up by a few social media accounts with large followings. Comments scrolled quickly beneath the video.
Why are these kids being stopped again?
Aurora Airlines needs to explain this. This doesn't look random at all. Naomi didn't know it yet, but within the next half hour, hashtags would begin trending. The video from the jet bridge would spark a wave of attention far beyond Gate 32. For now, all she knew was that their father was on the line. The world was starting to watch, and for the first time that day, she felt the tiniest spark of hope. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened as her father's voice came through, steady and deliberate. Naomi, put me on speaker. She obeyed immediately, holding the phone between her and Amara. The sound of papers shuffling faintly came through, then a low command. I want you both to stay exactly where you are. No matter what anyone says, you do not leave that jet bridge.
Yes, Daddy,
Naomi said. On the other end, David Carter's voice shifted, no longer the reassuring father, but the controlled authority of a CEO. Station Manager, Denver, Line 1 now. Initiate Protocol Orion. The words were crisp, sharp. Naomi didn't fully understand them, but she could tell by the way he said them that something had just changed. Amara leaned closer, whispering,
"What's Protocol Orion?"
Naomi shook her head. I don't know, but I think it's big. Inside the aircraft, Sandra Mill's earpiece crackled. She pressed a finger to it, her smile faltering. Say again? The voice on the other end was urgent. All Aurora flights. Protocol Orion. Immediate hold. Return to gate if taxiing. Repeat, hold at gate or return. Sandra's eyes widened slightly.
That's all flights?
Confirmed. This is direct from the CEO. Sandra's glance flicked toward the twins, then to the line of passengers still boarding. She felt her pulse quicken.
Copy,
she replied, her voice tighter now. She stepped out onto the jet bridge again, her shoes clicking sharply.
I'll be right back,
she muttered to another attendant before hurrying toward the gate. At that moment, the first announcements began filtering through the terminal. Attention, Aurora Airlines passengers. Due to an executive safety protocol, all flights are currently on temporary hold. Please remain at your gates for further updates. The message repeated in its calm, automated voice, but the effect was immediate. Murmurs turned to complaints. Passengers pulling out phones, scrolling through flight apps that now showed multiple delays. On the tarmac, planes that had begun taxiing turned slowly back toward their gates. Naomi and Amara exchanged glances as the mood in the terminal shifted.
Why is everyone so upset?
Amara asked softly. Naomi hesitated.
I think Daddy's making sure they listen.
At Aurora Airlines' Denver operations office, the scene was tense. Flight coordinators stared at their screens as every departure time flipped to delayed. The Denver station manager's phone rang again, David Carter's name flashing across the display. This is Reynolds, the manager answered quickly. David's voice was cold. I want every manager, every gate agent, and every crew member involved with passengers Carter on a call in 5 minutes. And Reynolds, yes, sir. Make sure it's recorded. Back at gate 32, Sandra Mills returned, her composure strained. Her earpiece buzzed again. Sandra, CEO Carter has personally requested your presence at the gate. My presence? That's correct. Now. Sandra's eyes darted to the jet bridge, where Naomi and Amara still stood. She smoothed her uniform, but her hands trembled slightly as she made her way back toward Richard Cole at the counter. Passengers still waiting to board glanced at her curiously, sensing tension but not understanding the cause. Meanwhile, the video of Sandra blocking the twins had gained traction online. The man in the suit had posted it with the caption, Aurora Airlines stopping unaccompanied minors with valid tickets. No explanation. Within minutes, replies flooded in. This is ridiculous. Protocol Orion? Never heard of it. What's going on? Are we watching a scandal unfold live? Reporters from 2 local stations had already tweeted that they were sending crews to Denver International. Naomi glanced at her phone as it buzzed. Notifications pouring in.
People are talking about us,
She whispered to Amara. Amara's brow furrowed.
Is that good or bad?
Naomi thought for a moment.
Both.
Sandra reached the counter where Richard was on the phone with operations. His expression tightened as he looked up. Sandra, the CEO wants you on the line. Her stomach sank. She pressed a button on the console, her voice controlled. Sandra Mills speaking. David Carter's voice came through, low and steady. Ms. Mills, I'm looking at a live feed from Gate 32. Would you like to explain why my daughters were prevented from boarding their flight? Sandra froze. Sir, I was just following verification protocol. David's tone cut like steel. That's interesting because your own operations system confirms their tickets were cleared 3 times today. Yet somehow, at each step, someone made sure they were delayed. You have 30 seconds to explain before this conversation moves to the full board. Sandra's throat tightened. There must have been a miscommunication. David's pause was long enough to make the silence heavy. Ms. Mills, step back from the boarding area. You'll be contacted shortly. Sandra's voice faltered.
Yes, sir.
Sandra stepped away from the counter, her polished shoes now feeling heavy. Passengers were whispering openly now, some recording as she walked briskly toward the crew lounge. Naomi watched her go, her heart racing.
Is she leaving?
Richard's voice cracked over the intercom, his tone brittle. Boarding is temporarily paused. Please remain in the seating area until further notice. The murmurs grew louder. Naomi could almost feel the wave of attention building, not just in the terminal, but beyond it. For the first time all day, she allowed herself a small breath of relief.